Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be revisiting Upfront, which, as you've probably guessed from the number of videos I've done, is one of my favourite games ever. And the purpose of today's video is just to look at the very basics of flanking and encirclement and how these tactical manoeuvres work in this game. Now, we all broadly know that in a combat situation, achieving a flanking position on your opponent is a really good thing. But what does flanking do in Upfront? Well, put very simply, with the exception of flamethrowers and indirect fire weapons, it enables a group to double its firepower against the group which it has successfully flanked. So it's a very powerful tool for achieving victory in this game. And it can be very difficult to accomplish. Now, in terms of the mechanics of how you maneuver your groups in order to achieve a flanking position, that side of it is relatively simple. But as ever with these things, achieving a good position on your opponent depends entirely upon how cooperative your opponent is feeling. And most of the time, players with a few games under their belts will not be feeling very cooperative. But I'm not going to worry too much about that side of things for this video. In fact, as you can see from the demonstration setup I've put together, I'm once again picking on the long-suffering British. I'm really sorry about this, chaps. By getting an implausibly small Group A together, unaccompanied by anyone else, of course, up against a group of 6 Japanese divided into a small Group A and a much more significant Group B. And I've just placed these fellows here so that I can give you a quick taster of how the different elements of flanking work. And from flanking, I'll also say some words about encirclement, because encirclement can be developed from flanking. So to start with, the most common method of achieving a flanking position on an enemy force, it's simply through the playing of a flank movement card in the lateral position. This is what's called lateral flanking in the game. Now, there are certain preconditions that have to be met for lateral flanking, but the most important is that the group you intend to flank must have one of your friendly groups directly opposite it. Think of them as keeping that group's attention while you flank them. The other important condition is that the group you intend to flank must not already be flanking you. Now, it's a bit of a tricky one, this, because of course the play of a movement card would get you out of being flanked by someone. But of course, when you play it with the stated intention of flanking someone, you can't declare them as a target if they're already flanking you, even if you're busy wriggling out of the trap. Now, if there was another British group, a Group C, then the Japanese group here would be able to declare that they were flanking them. But in this particular instance, I just want to keep things small. So assuming that the British Group A was not flanking them, the Japanese Group B could simply declare that they're moving into a flanking position. And if that card is still there at the end of their turn, then this chit is placed to show that British Group A has been flanked. Now, in both kinds of flanking, it is obviously impossible to flank a group that is directly opposite you, but you can flank groups that are on either side of your group. So Japanese Group B, of course, can flank British Group A and could hypothetically flank a British Group C as well. So having been flanked in the lateral manner, let's just say I've left that card there, what could happen to change that status? Well, if the British on a subsequent turn played a movement card of their own on their Group A, that would be enough to get rid of the flanking fire. They could also discard a wire card on the Japanese, and that would also break the flanking status. The Japanese themselves, if they played a subsequent movement card on themselves on another turn, that would do away with the flanked status. However, were the Japanese to play ordinary terrain on themselves, the flanked status would remain. So if it helps, think of it as the first card is the Japanese moving into position and they've gained that flanking fire position. And then they have subsequently found a good place to stop and really concentrate their fire on their victims. Because, of course, unless you're the United States with their Garand rifles in this game, even with the flanking fire bonus of doubling your firepower, having to halve it for moving fire with bolt action rifles negates that advantage. So it makes sense to stop in good terrain once you've gained the position. Now, it is possible to laterally flank someone and combine it with movement through, say, a gully or a marsh. The only downside is if you're not at relative range 5, achieving a flanking position from a gully is a bit pointless if you can't see the enemy. But if they're on a hill, it would be worth doing. Now, the other type of flanking is called natural flanking. And this is achieved very easily if you start your turn at relative range 5 to your intended victim. So continuing with this example, the British Group A and Japanese Group A are at relative range 5 from each other. And it just so happens that Japanese Group B is also at relative range 5 to the British. So all they need to do to achieve a natural flanking position is to play an ordinary movement card forward. That takes them to relative range 4, but they have now achieved automatic flanking fire on the British. Now this puts them in a really strong position because with natural flanking fire, they're not obliged to remain there. On a subsequent turn, they could retreat back to relative range 5 and the British would remain flanked. So with natural flanking fire, the onus is very much on the defending force to get themselves out of that situation, whereas their attackers have some limited wiggle room to actually get into a really good position to deal them some damage. With natural flanking fire, another game situation can occur which cannot happen in lateral flanking fire, and that is the phenomenon of mutual flanking. If the British had soldiers in a Group B in front of the Japanese Group B, it is entirely possible that the two would flank each other naturally, and the British would be equally entitled to a flanking fire token. That is a very unusual occurrence, and I've not seen it happen very often in my games, but it is a possibility, and it's worth remembering. So under certain circumstances, flanking can go both ways. Now, another thing that can break a flanking situation that doesn't involve play of movement cards or wire cards is the elimination of one of these groups. Now, naturally, if the flanking group is eliminated or the group that's being flanked is eliminated, then that goes away. But it also does if the British manage to eliminate Japanese Group A. And because what that does is it breaks the hold of the group that was keeping them occupied. And so essentially they're no longer flanked because they no longer have a threat to their front, and it's just mutual attention like that. Now, what about encirclement? Encirclement stems from natural flanking, but is far more potent in its effects. So let's say, if I can reconstruct the situation, the Japanese Group B had advanced, and we're now at relative range 4, effectively behind the British. On a future, they would of course achieve natural flanking through that, but on a future turn, if they played a sideways movement card, they could then mark the British as encircled. So in effect, what we have are the same conditions that you need for flanking. There has to be a group in front of them to keep them occupied or pinned down, while the other group works its way around them and encircles them. Now, unlike natural flanking, once you've encircled a group, it's really not a good idea to back off again, because it makes it easier for them to escape the encirclement. Now, what does encirclement do? If you get an encirclement token placed on you, the first major problem is you can't transfer either individuals or as a group. So no lateral transferring, no changing your group ID. Those tactical options are closed to you until you break the encirclement. You suffer from the effects of being flanked, which means that the enemy's firepower is doubled. And you also get a reduction in your panic values, which can be quite a severe penalty. So the $64,000 question then becomes, how do you break out of an encirclement? Well, the first option really is to move, because that is the only way you can get out. And in most cases, forward or lateral movement is not going to help you, because the way you break out of an encirclement is to put distance between yourself and the force encircling you. So you can take the option of running, because if you manage to get one of these two groups to back down to relative range 1 or 0 or even further away from you, then you're considered to have broken the encirclement. You can also back off to the point where both units are in front of you, so at less than relative range 5 but not behind you. So if you manage to get yourself far back enough, then you leave them behind. Now, it's very unlikely that a group that's encircled you is going to just let you do that, so it can be a difficult thing to do. And typically for upfront, you'll often find that movement cards are simply not there when you need them. Another method, if you're feeling a bit more aggressive and you've been encircled, is to try to infiltrate the encircling group. Or if you can infiltrate either group, then you break the encirclement. So there are options. It's not a hopeless position to be in, but as you can imagine, when you're either flanked or encircled and the enemy is firing cards of a very high value to play on you, unless you do something fast, you're not likely to live long enough to try and do something about it. Now, there's just a couple of other things I should mention in relation to flanking fire. And the most important one I want to bring up is, because I've been on the painful receiving end of this, is the bunker card that comes, or the pillbox card, I should rightly call it, that comes with the game. Because as it says on the card, flanking fire is not something you can do. It doesn't apply to a pillbox, but under certain circumstances it does. And what you need to do in order to get round a pillbox, literally, is to achieve natural flanking fire on it and then retreat back. So effectively what you've done, let's say our group starts at 0, relative range 5, and they've somehow managed to make it all the way up to the pillbox without taking too much heavy fire. You play your normal movement card, get to relative range 4 for having moved beyond it, and then on a subsequent turn, retreat back, and Group B would then be able to double its firepower against the pillbox. The pillbox would still have a limited ability to shoot back, but a very limited one. So you can also use flanking tactics against a pillbox, even though on the card it says you can't. But it's difficult to achieve, and really think of it as encircling the pillbox and getting into its blind spot. So there you go. Those are the very basics of how to achieve flanking positions, and also to a limited degree how to break out of flanking positions. Really, when it comes down to it, it's all in your movement options and what you can do with them. Of course, when you can achieve a flanking position in this game, and if you can do something snazzy like pin your opponent so that they can't run, then you are in a very strong position indeed. It's a bit of a holy grail in this game. And also, achieving a flanking position on someone means that you're more likely to be able to win the game by employing firepower rather than the highly risky prospect of close combat. That is usually preferred in this game because close combat can be quite swingy, as it is in real life. So there we go. I hope that's been useful. That really is the briefest of overviews of flanking and encirclement, but I hope it's been good as either an aide-memoire, or if, like me, you find Upfront's rules kind of overwhelming, I just hope it's been a nice, easy explanation as to how this particular mechanism of the game works. As always, please do leave me some comments, observations, queries, and of course, inevitably, because it's me, corrections are always welcome. It's really great to hear from you guys. As always, I just want to thank all of you who've taken the time to watch this video. To my regulars, as always, a huge hello to you fellows. Thanks for sticking with me, and thank you for your company. It's really, really good to have you guys along, as always. If you're here on my channel for the first time, you are more than welcome. If it's Upfront that's brought you to here, then please do have a look at some of my other videos. Please do read the descriptions, because whenever people point out errors or gaffes that I've made, I will always try and put them in a sensible format in the description so you know where I've gone wrong and what I should have done in the course of the video. But please do enjoy those, and I hope you find them useful. Whatever's brought you here, if you're interested in wargaming in general, then please have a wander around the rest of the channel. Hopefully you'll find something else that you like. And in any case, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to you all for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Bye.